day. Thank you for your church. Thank you for the encouragement of meeting together. Thank you for letting us go through your word, study it. Please help us to learn and to grow. In Jesus' name, amen. We are finishing up just the last couple verses of chapter 4, and then we're going to jump straight into chapter 5 tonight. I do have a couple extra copies of chapter 4 I forgot to set out, or I didn't set out somewhere. And if anyone would like those, I'll just set them on this table over here. Feel free to grab them. All right, we are in verse 15, I believe. Does that sound good to everybody? That's what my notes say. Okay, verse 15 of chapter 4. Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, "Go assemble all the Jews who are found in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maidens will also fast in the same way, and thus I will go to the king, which is not according to the law, and if I perish, I perish." Mordecai is successful in pleading with her to do something. And question 1 is, what indicates Esther's faith in God? She has a big request, right? What is it?
Well, have everybody fast and pray for him.
Have everybody fast and pray. Yeah, have everybody fast. And I thought it was interesting. I was watching the old classes of Papa teach this a couple years back, and it was mentioned how, it doesn't say pray here. It says fast, but it doesn't say anything about prayer. And it's interesting to me how an argument for something by it not being there is a bad argument for it. And I might have said that kind of bad. But for instance, God is not mentioned in this book at all. But is he there? Yes. So the absence of him being mentioned there is not a good argument for him not being there. And, the same thing with prayer. Just because it doesn't say they didn't pray, it's pretty assumed. I've always assumed it. And it's not a good argument for it not being there. But this shows Esther's faith. It shows her faith. And one more comment that I thought was kind of a neat thought was, one person can make a difference. Mordecai didn't bow. That made a difference. A negative difference, but a difference. Haman was very mad. That made a difference. Another negative difference. And Esther steps up here, and she's going to make a big difference. I thought that was kind of neat to think about. Yes?
I want to thank you for the big letters on the whiteboard.
Sorry, I'm standing in front of them.
It helps the Stevie Wonders in the background.
Yeah. Which, comment on this real quick. We might not get to this tonight. This is quite a ways into chapter 5. But we talked about gallows before, and I wanted to put this up there. Also, thank you for pointing that out, because I did want to point out a couple of things on the board, too, before I got too fast in going here. But there's 2 handouts in the back, 2 different pieces of paper. One of them is the LXX, which means Septuagint. It's like the abbreviation for it. And Septuagint means the Greek translation of the Old Testament. I have a copy of it tonight because, especially the first 4 verses in chapter 5, it's quite a bit, it's noticeably different than what the Hebrew says. And it's worth commenting on. I don't want to read through it because it's kind of a lot to read through. And for the sake of time, I just printed it off if you were interested. So if you're interested in it, please feel free to read it. And as we read through the first couple verses, hopefully some flags will go off like, wait a minute, that's kind of weird. And then I have a couple references for us that we'll get to later. But put them on the board just so if I forget, they're there. Okay. She calls for the Jews to fast 3 days, night and day. And she does as well. Question 2 is how does Esther express strong resolve? There's a phrase in this verse that really shows resolve, right? Yeah. If I die, I die. If I perish, I perish, right?
Today is a good day to die.
It's a good day to die. I don't think she says that. But if I do, I do, right? Man, that's... Talk about, a couple of verses ago, she was, I don't know about that. And then Mordecai gives her a fatherly talking to, and if I die, I die. Wow. Really cool, really cool. Whatever she was afraid of is put in perspective, It's put in perspective. So, verse 17. So Mordecai went away and did just as Esther had commanded him. There's a couple different lessons from this chapter that I wanted to mention. I'm not going to read through all of them. The first thing I wanted to mention is great biblical heroes and heroines were made, not born. I think that's a really cool, really good thought. And it goes right in with the next one, with great biblical heroes. We're as human as we are. That I really like that because, they're scared just like us. They're not. Sometimes we idolize them, but think of Moses. Moses put God off so many times before he was actually ready. 80 years old. All right, I guess now's the time. And also, I don't know if all of you heard Seth's sermon this morning, but there was one. Herodias mentioned this guy. What was his name?
Oh, Sophanes.
Sophanes. And Sophanes brought something into battle with him because he was worried about running away, right? Brought an anchor in with him so he wouldn't run away, and he's a great hero. And that just reminded me of this with super cool with, just because someone was a great hero, just wow, look up to him so much, doesn't mean they were born that way. And that's encouraging to me.
Adam, I have to say this.
Okay.
I remember when I first got married a long time ago.
All right.
And then my buddy came into town, and even though I was married, and I said, yeah, I got married. He said, oh, so you can call her the ball and chain now, huh? I said, I better not.
No. Not that kind of anchor. No.
Well, we keep you from running away.
It would get, you know what? Hey, there you go. There you go. We're going to go into chapter 5 now.
Always kept you straight.
Huh? It always kept you. Hey, my anchor's not here today. She went to Little Rock, but she has work trip. Chapter 5. We're going to start with verse 1. Verse 1, which is a natural place to start. Verse 1. Okay. Now it came about on the third day that Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace, in front of the king's rooms, and the king was sitting on his royal throne in the throne room, opposite the entrance to the palace. Question 1 is, on the third day, what does that mean? When is that? Third day of what? Fasting, yeah. Third day of fasting. Sometimes with chapter separations and stuff, I often forget what I was just reading about. So, third day of fasting, third day of the fast. Question 2, why did Esther put on her royal robes? Any ideas?
She was going to go into the king.
That's right. Yeah. This isn't some light gesture. We were just talking about how important this was. This is a life or death thing, right? Also, we were talking about in the last chapter, it's been 30 days. What is going on here? Is he tired of me? What? Fill in the blank. Your mind races, especially if you're in her shoes. So she puts on her royal robes, and this is you want to look your finest in the king's presence, and this is a matter of respect as well. It's not just a matter of, it also is a matter of, man, I want him to get, I want the camera to get my best side. I want him to see that. It's more than that. It's also a sign of respect, too. Question 3, what does the detail of this verse show us? It's kind of a vague question, isn't it? There's something specific I'm going for here, and I realize it's not the... Esther was very careful in choosing the place to stand in the palace. And in order to get the king's attention, she was very careful with that, and the detail of that is significant, I think. So, also, we did mention this. I wanted to comment again that Esther faces the threat of death. You know, we've mentioned it several times. The king has gotten rid of his queen before, and she still is very much aware of that, and that's why she's also very careful with where she is, how she's presented, she's very methodical in how she presents herself. And I wanted us to remember that. So, verse 2. When the king saw Esther, the queen, standing in the court, she obtained favor in his sight. And the king extended to Esther the golden scepter which was in his hand. So Esther came near and touched the top of the scepter. Question 1 is, why did she touch the top of the scepter?
I think when he extended it, that's how she touched it to say, I am coming.
There's, I kind of imagine it, this isn't exactly accurate, but I kind of imagine it as if I walked up to someone and say, hey, how are you? And nothing. That's rude, That's really rude. I think it was kind of a customary thing at the time, but also it was more than that too, because it was a gesture of recognition to his authority as well. So another gesture of recognition of authority would probably be bowing down. So something kind of similar to that as well. And maybe it was a combo thing, I don't know. But that's just, we talked about sackcloth and ashes last week a little bit with the customs of the time, and they had a lot of different customs, and that's why I want to kind of talk about them a little bit, because if we don't, it's really easy to forget them. So that was another one of those things, those customs. Verse 3. Then the king said to her, what is troubling you, Queen Esther? And what is your request? Even to half of the kingdom, it shall be given to you. The king can sense that something is on her mind. And, man, 30 days. Something's got to be on her mind. It baffles me sometimes. But question 1 is, did the king really mean that he would give her up to half his kingdom? No. That's right. No is the right answer. And before we answer this anymore, I wanted to comment, and I wrote this down a little bit, but you notice how he's dealing with the trouble in the relationship. There's relationship trouble here. You notice how he's dealing with it? It was interesting to me, but he's trying to buy it. What can I give you? How can I be generous with you? Because you can't have my time for the last 30 days. It's interesting to me. And it's interesting to me also because we're something like 2,500 years later, ballpark. Do we still solve the same problems in the same way? So often we, it would be so, you deserve my time, but since I didn't give it to you, what can I do to make it up for you? Or, so, yeah. Just something I was thinking about when I think about this King Xerxes. This up to half my kingdom is hyperbole. Exaggerated statement. This happens often because it was a customary thing for rulers, especially in Eastern empires, to take pride in their generosity. I did not know that, but that's something that's a very common thing. And it's not just a common thing, it's a status symbol as well. 450 years later, can we think of anybody else who did something like this? I know Roger can. He was talking to me about it earlier. 450 years later, there's another king who promises up to half his kingdom, right, Greg? Herod, that's right. Herod. And I mentioned his wife several times on accident in the preview in the first chapter of this book because I couldn't say Herodotus. I said Herodias several times. Yeah, Herodias. The daughter who danced for him, right? And he promised her up to half his kingdom. And she asked for the head of someone, John the Baptist. Another example I was thinking of, and I didn't look up the reference, is in the book of Daniel. It's not exactly half the kingdom, but whoever can tell me what this hand just wrote on the wall, I'll give him a ring, a robe, and a high place in my kingdom, third or second place in my kingdom. It was a very common thing. And along with it being a common thing, it was a very, very rude thing to not accept the generosity. That was very rude. And just like I just mentioned, how we handled bad problems poorly, or problems poorly, this back then was a status symbol, and even today it's a status symbol a lot of times. You know, how can I impress you with a good gift? You know, just there's a lot of things back then that still apply today very, very closely. We don't change a lot over time. We don't. Verse 4. Esther said, "If it pleases the king, may the king and Haman come this day to the banquet that I have prepared for him." Question 1 is, was it unusual for the king and queen to eat together? I would refer you to chapter 1. In chapter 1, there were 2 banquets going on. The king and Vashti, right? And then he called for the queen to come in, and then it was a whole debacle with everything. But apparently it was very uncommon for them to eat together. Just thought it was interesting. Something I would never have thought about it. Like, you know, in the movies, they always eat together. So, yep. Also, I commented earlier on the LXX back there, the copy, and feel free to read through that. It's kind of more than we have time for tonight. So it's the Greek translation of the first 4 verses of this chapter, of chapter 5. If you read through that after we just read through verses 1 through 4, you'll see it's quite a bit different. And in a few ways. And one reason why it's a lot different is the Hebrews had a charitableness towards the Persians, because the Persians freed the Jews. They protected them from, I believe, the Samaritans, and they also, with them rebuilding the temple, they protected them. And because of that, I think there's a little bit of paraphrasing to make him look better than there should be. So I just thought it was interesting. I have apparently not read the Septuagint before, so I always thought it was a good translation. But hey, anyways, apparently it's not always a good translation. Also, I believe, I want to get this right, but the Septuagint has a tendency to paraphrase the Hebrew in the latter prophets and poetic books. Just so you're aware. I did not know that, but I'm happy to learn and I'm happy to share. So, verse 5. Then the king said, "Bring Haman quickly, that we may do as Esther desires." So the king and Haman came to the banquet which Esther had prepared. Verse 6. As they drank their wine at the banquet, the king said to Esther, "What is your petition? For it shall be granted to you. And what is your request? Even to half my kingdom, it will be done." The king's curiosity was piqued. Yeah, Mr. Charlie.
I'm curious, is there a particular reason that the king would be so anxious to go to her banquet with Haman? I mean, I'm curious about that.
That's a good question, and I don't have a positive answer for you. I'm not positive. I would put dollars to donuts, is the saying. That he probably felt a little guilty. I would guess he felt a little guilty.
Good answer.
You know, just a guess, not positive. But it makes sense to
I'm
me.
just wondering, you said in the beginning that they had separate banquets, they didn't eat together.
Yeah.
Well, here he's anxious to.
That day, hey, get him, let's go. And just this one's probably a lot less true, right? But he might have been hungry. Sometimes I'm hungry and I'm ready to go. But I would guess probably guilt, not positive. Thank you. That's a good question. Yeah.
Or maybe just curious as to what she wants.
Also, yeah, maybe curious too. She clearly has his curiosity piqued. You know, what is going on? She didn't accept my generosity right away. Ooh, I wonder what's going on. You know, she's playing a dangerous game. She showed up right here. That could have got her killed. She didn't tell me what she wanted right away. she's playing a dangerous game, but I think, as we'll talk about in a minute, I think she's being really, really smart and methodical in how exactly she's doing this. I don't think she was just wasting her time by any means. I think she's been preparing while she's been fasting, you know. If not, then I think God's really helping her too. Or both. Okay. So he wants to know her petition so he can grant it. His curiosity is piqued. Verse 7. So Esther replied, my petition and my request is, verse 8, if I found favor in your sight, in the sight of the king, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and do what I request, may the king and Haman come to the banquet that I will prepare for them, and tomorrow I will do as the king says. She adds to it even more, just delays them even more. Question 1, is Esther taking a risk by putting off telling the king her petition? Yes. Big time. But I will remind you, a big risk for a big request. She's not saying something small. This just went out through the whole empire. This is going to be quite a lot to undo, I would imagine. So I think she also masterfully holds him in suspense. Not too much, not too little. I think she's doing a really good job of that. Question 2. Does Esther sense the importance of patience? Yes, and this is my references on the board. I'll stand to the side while I read them. Proverbs 25 and Ecclesiastes 8, 4 through 6. Proverbs 25 says, through patience, a ruler can be persuaded, and a gentle tongue can break a bone. Hey, Solomon, smart guy. Ecclesiastes 8, 4 through 6. Since a king's word is supreme, who can say to him, what are you doing? Whoever obeys his command will come to no harm, and the wise heart will know the proper time and procedure. For there is a proper time and procedure for every matter, though a man's misery weighs heavily upon him. How appropriate words for this situation. And who knows? She may have been thinking about those, but... Moving on to question 3. Question 3, sorry. Why does Esther want Haman to be present for the 2 banquets? Any ideas? Any thoughts on this?
So when she explains to the king what's going on, he's right there.
I think you're exactly right. Yeah. I think that's a huge part of it. I think that, let me read the answer here. So she knows they're close. They're clearly close. He just handed him his signet ring in the last chapter. He says, go ahead, do it. Put my name on it, whatever you want. He also promoted him to second in command. Haman also promised him a ton of money. Well, multiple tons of money. And she wants to expose him in the king's presence so he won't have an opportunity to prepare an excuse, and he also won't have an opportunity to persuade the king to relent. I think both of those are really important. If you catch someone off guard versus you give them time to prepare, there's going to be a big difference. And again, I think it has to do with how much thought she's put into it and how much God's helping her. Yeah.
Speaking of thought, you just made me think, I've never thought of this before, but I wonder if she knew the king's proclivity to have a temper tantrum.
I think she had to know.
And if she knew that, what better way to, take care of business right then and there,
I think you're exact. I mean, she has to know, because how is she in the position she's in? He had a temper tantrum, and he listened to, he's got this track record of, boom, acting right on the spot, doing whatever it is, not thinking it through, trusting other people, whatever. I think this goes into, 1, she's thinking it through, and 2, God's really helping her do something really smart. So, good comment on that. The next couple of verses, we're talking about Haman's pride, and, well, we'll get to it, and I'll make my comment then. So, verse 9. Then Haman went out that day glad and pleased of heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, and that he did not stand up or tremble before him, Haman was filled with anger against Mordecai. Question 1, did Mordecai acknowledge Haman's presence when he passed by? No. And I want to be careful because we talked about how this may have been, he may have had an idol around his neck or something. There may have been a really good reason why Mordecai wasn't bowing down. But I have to, at least for a minute, I think, man, he didn't learn a lesson either. He still is stuck on, he might be really stubborn. There might be a really good reason why he's not doing it. Or he might just be really stubborn. Or it may have been something like, instead of learning a lesson, it's too little too late. If I bow now, I'm going to die anyways. So why would I'm going to stick to my guns. I don't really know, but it's just interesting to me because we started off chapter 4 with him running into the court and not being allowed to go any further, but he's in sackcloth and ashes because he knows all the Jews are going to die because of something he did. So it baffles me a little bit how still sticking to his guns on it, but there may have been a really good reason for it. Verse 10. Haman controlled himself, however, went to his house and sent for his friends and his wife Zeresh. Verse 11. Then Haman recounted to them the glories of his riches, the number of his sons, and every instance where the king had magnified him, and how he had been promoted above the princes and the servants of the king. I don't know if this is a question or not, or a comment. If it's on your page, great. If it's not, I apologize. But why did Haman send for his friends and his wife when he arrived at the house? He could brag about it. You've bragged about it a lot, right? Let me just tell you how great I am and everything I've done and why I deserve this so much. That's one reason. He wanted to brag. And the other reason is he sees Mordecai, and suddenly the order for all the Jews to be killed just isn't enough. He's not sure what to do. So he calls them for advice as well. Verse 12. Haman also said, Haman also said, even Esther the queen, let no one but me come to the king's banquet, which she had prepared. And tomorrow I am also invited by her with the king. 13. Yet all this does not satisfy me every time I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. What's Haman's problem? I kind of just said it. It's not enough. All his riches, everything is not enough. The fact that I'm killing all the Jews is not enough. Something else has to be done. This guy is humiliating me. It's kind of sad as far as his whiny goes. Just not enough. It is revealing his dissatisfaction appeal for help on the part of Haman. Yes, he wants some advice. Let me see. No matter how much he brags about his importance, he just doesn't feel important. And as there was one person who did not agree with that, he just doesn't seem to have the esteem for himself as he wants to have. And he couldn't handle that. He doesn't seem to understand, and I'm reading this because I really like this phrase. Self-respect and the respect of others does not come from titles, but it comes from character. I really like that. It doesn't matter your title. It matters who you are. Jesus taught, how many years later? Many years later, 400 years later, whatever, 450 years later, the greatest among men would be servant of all. I think that speaks a lot. Character speaks a lot. Let's try and get one more verse before our time's almost up. One more verse. Verse 14. Then Zeresh's wife and all his friends said to him, have a gallows 50 cubits high made, and in the morning ask the king to have Mordecai hanged on it. Then go joyfully with the king to the banquet. And the advice pleased Haman, so he had a gallows made. Question 1 is, did Haman's wife and friends have a suggestion that would make him happy. Yes, so happy that he started it immediately, right? He started it immediately. Question 2 is, what is a gallows? Gallows is an instrument on which people are hanged. Question 3 is does the word gallows accurately translate the Hebrew in this verse? And this is, we actually made it to here tonight. This is, I can't pronounce this, I don't know. But I can tell you the Hebrew for this word is wood pole or tree. And what's meant by it is torture or killing by fixing on a sharp stake. So gallows, while it being the translation, I don't think in English is quite the idea that's being translated or being inferred. Just wanted to, I know we talked about this before, but I just wanted to mention it again. Why was the gallows made so high? How many cubits? 50 cubits? 50 cubits is if it's 18 inches, is 75 feet. If it's 21 inches, it's 88 feet. It's really high.
Yes.
People would look up. It would be a spectacle, right? It would be a spectacle.
And it's also kind of bad to be up on a tree or.
Cursed is any man on a tree.
As far as the Jews are concerned, because that's one of the things.
Yes, cursed is any man on a tree or something like that. Yeah, yeah. And I wanted to mention the enormous height is probably due to the fact that the tree or the pole or whatever was put up on a high hill or on some previously existing structure. Probably. Paul.
Back in the day, they put a hood over your head. You do that?
I don't think so because I think of that with hanging people, because that was something that was common, at least when I watched westerns and stuff. That was something more common, right?
I always thought that was a gallows.
Yeah.
They pull a cord and the bottom.
They drop and they hang, right?
Well, that's probably not a good translation.
It's probably I don't think it's quite the idea that's being. It's Persians. I think Persians did crucifixion. Right, the Persians did crucifixions, and the Romans perfected it. I believe that's how history goes. So just by tradition, they would do crucifixion. So which would work with a pole more, right? Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
One other thing, Adam,
Yes,
the gallows Roger just mentioned, that was something you built overnight,
the
gallows.
right. Well, and the same with
The other would take a while.
a tree. I don't think a tree. I think tree works for the wood part, but it's not literally a tree. But with a pole is similar though, because they could get that up pretty fast as well. They really could. Yeah. I don't want to say anything like, hey, I have a real problem with this translation or that. I just, from what I'm seeing with the notes of history and stuff with Persians and tradition being more of a crucifixion than hanging, I just wanted to pass that on. You guys can use that how you will. Use that how you will. I think we
Jerry
have.
had something to say too.
Who? Oh, hey.
Isn't a gallows also what they did with the witches in Salem?
Oh, I don't know. I think so, but
They burned it
I am less informed in that area. My American history and my world history are two different. Yeah, I struggle with American history. Yeah, sorry. We just have a couple more questions. So let me see. Why was it so high? Probably because it was on a previously existing platform. What can be said about Haman's friends? They were yes people. That's what can be said about him. People pleasers. I don't want him to be mad. Yes. Is there any doubt expressed in the willingness of King Xerxes to grant his request? No. He's pretty confident, isn't he? Yeah. Yeah. And the last thing, I believe I printed them off for you, is what lessons can we learn from this chapter? God's providential assurance does not rule out Esther or our best use of human capabilities. I like that. And I'm going to let you guys read through the rest. I'm going to pray for us. That's why that's there. Dear God, you are so good. You are so good to us. You are so good to this world. We don't deserve you. We know that you are all-powerful. And while you, for some reason, use us and allow us to be a part of your plan, we're not going to stop your plan. Your plan is going to continue with or without us, and we are so grateful that you let us be a part of that plan. Please use us, and please help us to be willing to be used by you as we go from here. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks, guys. We made it through a whole chapter.